Afternoon, citizens. I've been going through one of my periodic bouts of doubt and um, I, I suppose you might say bewilderment in a way, um, in lieu of everything that's been happening these last few weeks. Um, I just wanted to read you something which I saved some time ago, but it's been nagging at me for some time. It says, to extend Sam Francis's central insight, not quite sure who Sam Francis is, to extend San Francis's central insight about the narco-tyranny, we can easily imagine a system in which crime is precisely managed so as never to exceed certain boundaries beyond which ordinary people would revolt. Events of the last 3 years have provided governments around the world with immense amounts of data about exactly how far citizens today can be pushed, in which directions, and for how long before they begin to push back, if indeed they do at all. In the US, while there is clearly an increasingly determined political effort aimed at protecting criminals, as seen for instance in local moves to reform bail practices and broader campaigns to defund the police, and at terrorising particular demographics that the regime wants to disenfranchise, the white middle classes and white conservatives especially, conditions are still far from uniform, with plenty of local variation. What would it take to bring about a truly national system of anarcho-tyranny isn't totally clear. Demographic change as a result of continuing mass immigration is likely to do a large part of the work, as it helps to transform the political and social fortunes of the country. See, one of my, for reasons that should be obvious, one of the words in the English language that I dislike the least is database. Now, as that article suggests, and I suppose most people aren't necessarily aware of, is that the governments have been particularly and probably deliberately vague about the data that they collected with regard to the medical information, its efficacy and its safety, um, in order to bring about some sort of deniability to the revelations that are now coming out now. So, that even the pharmaceutical companies have done the same. They've eliminated the control group and things like that, and they haven't given um, the same dose, the same concoction to the general public um, as was trialed, for instance. So there's been a a deliberate lack of data being collected. But there has been, and almost certainly will be, and we'd be naive to think it was anything other than this, there is, I'm sure, an enormous amount of data that has been amassed by governments around the world to see how far they can push us, as the article suggests. And this is what they do. If you want to introduce an unpopular policy, you don't do it all at once. You do it inch by inch. You push an inch and then another inch and then a foot and then 3 foot. And when the public starts to push back at 3 foot, then you back off and you wait until they've forgotten all about it. And then you push another 3 foot. And so you're increasing your control all the time. And the database will have collated all this information to know at what point we do push back. So they will know precisely how far to push and how often and when to back off in order to get their plans through. They'll know that. I mean, there'll be some shadowy department in every government that is doing this, that is collecting all this data. And there's nothing inherently wrong with data, but you can tell from the data they don't collect the things they don't want to tell us. Like, for instance, the last census, the 2021 census, is apparently going to be the last one. They're not going to do another one. And so they've been doing it every 10 years for 150 years or whatever. And now they've stopped. And why is that? If you were of a cynical frame of mind, you might think it's because they don't want to know about the demographic change that's taking place. By using their own census data from 2021, there are apparently in the region of, or getting on for 4 million Muslims in the UK. Using that same data and drawing as broad a brush as possible, including family members and mixed marriages and all the rest of it, there is at most 470,000 Jews in the country. So, they're outnumbered in the region of 10 to 1. And so it's not really surprising now that after the events that have been going on in Palestine and Israel, is that the Israelis are not getting any sympathy generally. It's the Palestinians that are getting sympathy. Now, I think we should safely assume that nothing happens by accident these days, and we should never really. We should turn on its head that old dictum was, "Don't put down to malice what can be explained by incompetence." I think we should turn that on its head, and we should assume, until proven otherwise, that things are done through malice, unless it can be shown to be incompetence. It's not incompetence that has enabled somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people to come into the country every single year for the last 20 years, whatever it is. Well, it was less than that when Blair first came to power, certainly. But it's been ramping up ever since. I mean, last year it was 1 million. 1 million people. We now have a population, supposedly, and probably exceeding 70 million people. Now, of course, if you were, again, of a cynical or conspiratorial mindset, you might think, and I'm not suggesting this is the case, but you might think that the entire COVID debacle was an exercise in how far they could push us. You might think that. But the thing is, you get that data on how far you can push people by coercing and encouraging, and then persuading, and then coercing, and then forcing people to do things. That's how you get the data of how you can get people to do things, because if you encourage somebody to take a certain medical intervention, then they might just take the encouragement and just ignore you. Okay, so there's that. Some people will take it off as this is just government advice, it's a good idea, better take it. And then there'll be people who won't take it. And then there will be people who are kind of shamed into doing it. You're a granny killer. And so there will be some people um, who weren't predisposed to take it, but when you know when the social opprobrium became harsh enough, they gave in and they took it. And then there will be people who could ignore the social opprobrium, and then they say, well, if you can't go, you can't go to the cinema, or you can't go to the restaurant, or you can't go to the supermarket, or whatever like that, anything like that. So there will be people who do that, who will they'll catch another load of people who realise that there's certain things they can't do, even they don't want to take it, so they give in as well. And then there will be people who they really do turn the screws on, like the care home workers. They say, well, you will lose your job if you don't take it. And so they get another load. But there are always holdouts. There are always people who won't give in. But the data that they've collected will be able to identify those people and identify all the people who are susceptible to pressure. People who, you know, people who have children to look after and dependents and stuff like that, and they know how to coerce them to do such things. And so they will build up this data in order so that they can do the next thing, whatever that might be. So they build up this data from all these different data points. There's encouragement, there's persuasion, there's social shaming, there's coercion, and and then there's outright threats as well. In some countries it was worse. Um, but they get all that data from those data points. But if you were to, and this is what I try to encourage people to do, and the thing is, if you behave with principle, then you don't let any of this stuff in. If you behave with principle, so I'm not taking out of principle. Then there's not really an in for them. Of course, that data will be collected as well. Yeah, this bloke is taking a principled stand, and we can't get through to it. But if everybody did that, they wouldn't be able to collect all the data on all the other data points. If everybody abided by the Nuremberg Code, which is quite clear about coercion, it's not allowed, for obvious reasons when it was written in 1948. If everybody abided by that, then they'd know they wouldn't be able to get beyond that. And they wouldn't be able to collect any more data points on this. But I know I keep banging on about this. This is always the danger of surveillance. This is the point of surveillance. In East Germany, the East German Security Service, in the Soviet era, the Stasi, their motto was to know everything. Now we now have the surveillance capabilities they could only dream of. I mean, imagine how terrible it would have been if they had all the surveillance capabilities we do today. Maybe East Germany would still be a thing. But this is the whole point of surveillance, and and what it's more euphemistically called monitoring. Klaus Schwab said that everyone's going to have to get used to more monitoring, but that's just surveillance. That means you have to get used to me watching you, and by the way, you can't watch me at the same time. It's not a level playing field. It's not. This isn't reciprocal. We're going to watch you, but you can't watch us. See, surveillance is only to get information. And it's to get private information that they couldn't previously get because because they couldn't get it, and also because they weren't allowed. Now, they're still not allowed to get it. They're still not allowed to spy on us, but spy on us they do. And then when they get found out that they're spying on us, what do? They just change the law to make it what was illegal legal. And that's what they did after Edward Snowden. They got caught red-handed. First, what did they do? Introduce a law in Parliament saying that illegal thing we were doing is now legal. And all the people that were doing those illegal things, nobody got disciplined, nobody got fired, nobody went to jail. But surveillance is the thing that enables everything else. It enables vaccine passports. It enables ULEZ. It enables 15-minute cities. It enables CBDCs. Surveillance enables all of this stuff. Quite simply, surveillance enables control. And they quite obviously want all of the control, and they don't want us to have any. They certainly don't want us to have the control over them that they've got over us. The cashless society is essentially financial surveillance. So they're going to know what you buy. We don't want you buying that. Don't buy that. We can stop you buying that. No beer, no wine, no cigarettes, no petrol, no red meat. But you know how it goes. And the surveillance also is what enables the location of, if they bring that in and they don't want you traveling more than 5 miles from your house, then you try going 6 miles around trying to buy something. You won't be. It's not that you won't be allowed to. You just won't be able to. This is a world not run by laws, but run by a technocratic clamp that comes over you. Doesn't matter what the law is. Doesn't matter what your opinion is. Doesn't matter. We're not interested. It's irrelevant what you think. Your money doesn't work out here. Go back into your 15-minute city. I mean, quite. I was rather dismayed to see an article. I didn't read it. I suppose you should have done. Didn't read it, but from Toby Young, Free Speech Union. But James Dillingpole's mate, and it was, what if CBDCs aren't as bad as we think they are, and maybe they will stop the overreach of companies like PayPal. Toby Young's not an idiot. Why did he say that? He got pretty ratioed in the comments for it, but nevertheless, and someone said, well, he really, really wants a knighthood. Why would you want a knighthood anyway? What do you gain from having a knighthood? I don't know. I don't understand this. If the honours system was as it should be, it would be an honour to be in the honours. But I'm sure that's not why people go for it. I mean, is it influence? I mean, you don't get any money for it, I don't think. I don't know. Yeah. It's weird. But surveillance is the tool that enables everything else. You know, it enables ULEZ. Yeah. Um, and when automatic number plate recognition came in, it was sold to us on combating terrorism, and they're using the exact same technology for ULEZ. And for and they're trying to use it to be able to drive around Oxford or Canterbury or whatever. You know, it's the most pernicious of things. Yeah, yeah. We drove out with Mrs. X yesterday. I spot every one of them. Yeah, I spot every one of them. There's fucking loads of them now. Not ULEZ cameras. We didn't go that far up, but automatic number plate recognition cameras. Yeah, they're just fucking everywhere. And the only way of stopping it, you can't. We're not going to vote our way out of this. Anybody who's got a brain in their head knows we can't vote our way out of this. All the parties that are against this are just minnows. You know, even Reform and Reclaim. There's minnows. And then there's other parties like um, Heritage. I'm not saying that people shouldn't. You know, I'm not saying people shouldn't vote for those tiny parties if necessary. If anything, all it means is that your conscience is clear. You know, this voting for the lesser of two evils is it's a fool's game. It's a slave's game because it's like basically, well, if you vote for the Labour Party, they're going to enslave you next week. If you vote for the Tories, they'll enslave you in 6 months' time. You know, they'll just slow it down slightly to make it more acceptable. But there's no difference between those two. And if you do vote for Heritage or Reclaim or For Britain or any of these places, any of these parties, then at least you can have a clear conscience that you didn't help. At least that. It's not much, but it's something. Um, but we can't vote our way out of this. The only way of dismantling the surveillance state is to do what the Blade Runner's do, and actually dismantle it. That's the only way of doing it. You know, Obviously, I don't condone vandalism. But this thing um, about principle, it just goes. If everybody behaved with principle, so many things would be so much better. It's uh, I mean, for instance, whichever side you stand on this Israel Palestine thing, you could anchor yourself in some sort of principle. It's fiendishly complicated. It's been going on for 75 years or 3,000 years, depending on your point of view. So just morons like us aren't going to sort it out. But you can at least say, well, look, I don't want to promote anything that creates further bloodshed. You can have sympathy for this side or sympathy for that side, but it's if you have sympathy for your own side and you think that they are entitled to hit back, then well, you're I don't think I don't think that's sustainable as a position, really. I'm not getting into that. I'm not going to get into the whole Israel Palestine thing, but I think, yeah, I think urging. I don't think you should encourage revenge, no matter how justified you think that is. I just don't think you should do that. You know, um, you know, um, in our personal lives, if if somebody wrongs us, then it's your personal choice whether or not you retaliate against that in a just for retribution's sake. Then that's your business, you know, and the person who supposedly wronged you, and that's a personal matter. That's not for anyone else to get it. But on the scale of states, this is, you're. I think you have to take the Gandhi thing. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Um, but as far as I'm not especially inclined to take Israel's side on this. Not especially for personal reasons, but I have been rather sort of dismayed by the amount of people who, after the massacre, the massacre perpetrated by Hamas, it seemed the Israeli bodies weren't even cold before people were having a go at the Israelis, even before they'd even done anything, you know. And and the demonstrations in London and elsewhere, that they're quite plainly, which are quite plainly anti-Semitic, anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish. Um, that is quite plainly what they are. And I mean, I'm not one for decriminalising any kind of speech. I think there are certain things that just out of decency that people shouldn't say. But I think there's very, very little, if anything at all, that you should be prohibited from saying, no matter how disgusting it is. Um, but this is, this two-tier standard on what's considered hate speech. I mean, the utterly pathetic Metropolitan Police. Uh, they were telling blokes who had England flags that if there's any racist talk or something, they're going to be arrested, and yet there's people with signs up saying, gas the Jews, or I don't know. It's utterly depressing. It's utterly depressing, and I have to say, I do feel rather. I fear for British Jews. Actually, I really do. Because they suddenly found themselves outnumbered 10-1 by a hostile group, and a hostile group that seemed to be being protected by the British state. You um, my one hope about this whole thing is that this might actually begin to wake some people up, but the you know the shit that we're in here. Um, and somebody posted a thing saying, um, uh, somebody on the Israeli sympathetic side saying, it was that they were ashamed to be British because of, how all this anti-Semitism was being broadcast all over central London and everything. And somebody said, well, made the point. It's actually, well, you said, fuck you. It's not the British who were doing it. And of course, it isn't British. It's all these other people who've just arrived from God knows where, and bringing all their intergenerational hatreds to our shores. You know? But it's quite sickening to see the police doing what they do. I mean, it's par for the course now. We know what they're like. They're unprincipled and they're cowardly, which is quite a combination, really. Um, maybe it will allow a proper discussion to take place. Maybe it will. But we do seem to be the the unraveling of the West seems to be accelerating, at a frightening pace. I mean, I'm going to be 60 in 4 years' time, and I've always wanted to take a cross country trip across America, and I'm thinking about if I could if I'm at, if I've got any possibility of doing it, I've got to start saving for it now. And it just occurred to me: is the US going to survive that long? It's I'm not at all confident it will. It does seem as if this collapse is fucking hurtling towards us at a speed that is bewildering. And it's just so unnecessary, isn't it? We had a functioning society. We had a completely functioning society. And it's just going to it's going to commit suicide. I mean, not only is it tragic, it's also just bizarre. It just didn't have to be this way. I mean, I know the West has had its crimes, it's done its things, but you know, really, the West it's really done quite. Everybody in the world wants to come to the West. Now, why is that? Is it because it's a shithole? No, it isn't. It's because it's the best place to live. I sometimes think that because we're an island here, we have an opportunity to succeed where, other countries, on the continent, have a much more difficult time of it because, you know, we, our border is 22 miles deep at its narrowest. It's not a fence, and yet somehow we get even more people coming over here. I mean, I'm not quite sure if we get the most amount of people. I know Germany gets a lot, France gets a lot, Sweden gets a lot, um, but what should have been a strength of us being an island and part of the continued thing about Brexit was that we would be able to exert some sort of control over this. But since then, there's been no control. It's the opposite of control. You could almost say it's controlled in its uncontrolled amount of immigration. There are there are all sorts of people and institutions making sure that there are no restrictions whatsoever on who comes here. Or maybe even that's not true. Maybe it's true. Maybe what it's true is to say that the only restrictions are that the very worst people come here. You know, anybody that's useful doesn't get to come here. You know, anybody that goes through the right channels, anybody who's something to contribute, you know, anybody with money or expertise or anything like that, or skills or anything like that, none of those people get to come here. We just get the very worst people. And I don't mean that in you know, that these people are all animals. I don't mean that. That's not what I mean at all. What I mean is that these are people that they only have what the least skilled people in this country have. You know, they might not have any experience, or you know, all they have is, you know, is is a desire to live in a place like this. That's all it is. You know, there's no desire to contribute to the culture or the economy. It's they have this desire to come here because of what this place can give them. You know, and so that puts them in direct competition with the very worst people here who are already here. You know, I have a granddaughter now. She's what? She's now 16 months old. You know, it's fucking scary. You know, she'll be 8 in 2030, and she'll be 28 in 2050. So what's the world? What's this country going to be like for a 28-year-old English woman in this country? None of these disasters that are happening to this country, you know, this catastrophe, the continuing catastrophic collapse of our society and our morality would not be happening if people had just behaved in a more principled way. None of it would be happening. If people had drawn their lines in the sand and said, you're not going over that line, don't you cross that line. But they didn't. You know, I wonder if the whole COVID thing was just an example to say how quickly and easily and efficiently can we separate people from their morals and from their principles. How quickly can we do it? How easily can we do it? It turns out they can do it quite easily. The other thing is that if you've been separated from your principles once, it's difficult to regain that. You know, in a way, it shouldn't be, because you think, well, I fucked up there, and and I'll let them do something they shouldn't have done last time, so I'm not going to do it this time. You know, in a way, it should be easier. It should be easier to stand up for your principles under those circumstances. But in another way, it is. You just think, well, I abandoned my principles once. Well, I haven't really got a leg to stand on now. You know, yeah. But it's not too late for people to start standing up for things. You know, this all this and an obvious an obvious way of standing up to it in a way that is historically significant is by standing up for a minority. We need to stand up for the Jews in this country. I mean, whatever you may think of Israel, and you know, they've got some things to answer for, certainly, and none of this stuff is cut and dried, and the Palestinians have a pretty fucking awful time of it. I'm not letting them off the hook, but when you've got Jewish schools shutting down because they were afraid of all the Hamas apologists coming along and saying gas the Jews, you know, that's a perfect example of how people should behave with principle. The people in those areas, Jews and non-Jews alike, but particularly non-Jews, should be going up and offering to be protection for the Jewish schools and to protect those Jewish school children. Against a hostile and much larger enemy. That doesn't mean that you support Israel or you support Zionism or any of this crap. That shouldn't mean that. In the same way that not in the same way that protesting and doing everything you can to prevent Israel retaliating in the brutal way that they will, that doesn't mean that you support Hamas. This is not, both of those stances can be principled, and you've only got to go off that straight and principled path not very far, and suddenly you're in with the baby killers. The whole thing is never again, isn't it? Talk about never again, about the Holocaust and the persecution of the Jews, and saying, well, never again. Well, if I was a Jewish person in Britain, I'd be thinking, oh, fuck me, this is happening again. I mean, this might just burn itself out like BLM did. And there are forces at work which are there are forces at work that are fueling this fire, for their own cynical reasons. But I don't even want to get involved in this. This is not really, I don't have a dog in this fight. I want to support this country, not somebody else's. Somebody else's country can support themselves. It's nothing to do with me. But I don't think any of us should be, allowing a tiny minority to be victimised like this. Because it's the Jews today. It's the Jews today. We can, of course, if you're not Jews, you may think, well, that's nothing to do with me. You might think that, but it'll be the Christians next, and then it'll be secular Brits. We know what's going on. This is quite obvious what's happening here. It's not about, it's not about people having differing opinions here and all agreeing to live together with differing opinions. We know that isn't the case. there is a certain group who want to dominate everyone else. You know, I mean, some people may say, will the Jews dominate in other ways? Well, yeah, I guess they do, and they can be an annoying bunch, But all successful people can be annoying. The Jews, the Germans, the Chinese, the Japanese, all of these people are brainier than us, and a lot of them are, there's a lot, they're brainier than us, and uh, and there's a lot more of them, you know. But if we'd acted with principle, we would never have had the COVID bollocks, the vaccine passports and their care home workers getting fired, and you know, wouldn't have had all that. We would have been able to say, well, maybe there's a medical emergency, but that doesn't mean we have to abandon our principles. We'll just find a way of getting around it. And there were options. There were options um, put forward by people who knew. To focus protection for the vulnerable. But every development we get these days is an attempt to undermine our own freedoms. We're all being conditioned to view our freedom as being selfish. You know, I mean, it's just astonishing that the idea of freedom and particular things like freedom of speech has been such a hard sell. I mean, part of the reasons it's a hard sell is that so many people shout for freedom of speech so long as the thing being said is something they agree with. When you this is why I don't think you know this is why I don't think support for vocal support for Hamas shouldn't be. I mean, they say it's a prescribed organisation, but that's just law today. I mean, tomorrow it could be something different. You know, my feeling is that you should allow everybody to say anything, and you let anybody refute those things. I mean, and allowing people to say anything is a risk. You know, you've got a bloke says, "I want you to kill that bloke over there." That's a risk. But just because a bloke says that you've got to kill that bloke over there, doesn't mean you should do it. And if somebody does say that and somebody goes and kills that bloke over there, it's not the fault of the bloke who said it. It's the fault of the bloke who did it. That's principle. It's that bloke who said it may be guilty of something, and he can be publicly shamed or whatever it is. But he's not responsible. The person who did the killing is responsible. I mean, the only silver lining of this couple of weeks is that because of what's happened, um, and because of the sort of immediate knee-jerk backlash against uh, Israel and the Jews, even before the bodies were cold, um, might actually wake a few people up. Yeah, yeah, it's, yeah. I'm sorry if this is another rant. This is just a rant. I've got, as you know, there's no focus beyond this, but I'm feeling the punch. I'm feeling the pinch like everyone else. I can't afford the 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 time to devote to this stuff. I do my best, but it's I do what I can. Yeah, you know, most of you are very kind about my efforts, so I appreciate that. Um, I mean, the only reason I'm doing this today is because Mrs. X is out for the afternoon, so it's and there's all sorts of jobs around the house that I'm not doing because I'm doing this. I don't know. Can we pull this back? We're in a very advanced level of decay here. Maybe the problem is that most people don't understand or are not exposed to this stuff. You know, I mean, I'm a bit obsessed by it because for all sorts of reasons, most of which I've explained. Um, but for the people who are just a bit apathetic, they don't. I feel they've no idea what's coming. You know, I was listening to someone who was a teacher in some, school in some shithole place in America somewhere, and they were saying that you know, as it got more and more non-white, I suppose you'd say, and when the black kids hit about 40%, it was a pretty shitty school anyway, but apparently, but when they hit about 40%, when they could see they were just about to become a majority, that's when all the real violence started. People started getting really beaten up and that sort of stuff, and that you get the feeling that that's might well happen here. You know, um, what do they say? 2060 is when white British will be a minority in this country. Um, that looks pretty optimistic. 2060 at the moment, you know. Um, but maybe it will be. I don't know. It's the something's got to give. Maybe that the acceleration will startle enough people. But I don't know. We keep imagining that there will be a point at which people will start to push back, and it never really happens. I mean, things we don't have any choice. We just have to keep pushing, hoping that it's going to happen. You know, when Andrew Bridgen was in Parliament on Friday. I mean, I knew it was going to be empty in Parliament because MPs like to get away for the weekend on Friday, so there's hardly any parliamentary work done on a Friday, and they like a nice easy um, run into the new week as well, so they don't do much on Monday either. So basically, politicians work 3 days a week, 80 grand plus expenses, which is kind of nice. Nice work if you can get it. Um, so I knew that the chamber was going to be empty, but they didn't have it all their own way. I think I counted 14 MPs in there, and probably about three or four of them probably had to be there. One's on the Tory front bench, and there must have been. I think there was only one person on the Labour front bench, but the gallery was full. As you will have heard, that there was cheers from the gallery. So I wonder what it must be like being MP at the moment. An MP that's just ignoring all this stuff. because it is coming. You know, it's, I mean, what Pfizer said, it's on their own website now that that jab causes myocarditis. I think they said it was just a conspiracy theory for ages, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, oh you're right. Yeah, yeah, it does cause myocarditis. Yeah, yeah, and you know, we administered 4 billion doses to people. That's nice, isn't it? Yeah. I suppose it's a lack of accountability which is so galling. Is that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how obviously guilty the guilty parties are, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, we are guilty. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Next. Yeah. This happens everywhere. Like it within the next 5 years, I predict that the the CIA will admit that they killed Kennedy. Within the next 5 years, I'll pretty much predict that that's what they're going to say. They can say, yeah, we did it. You know, and nothing will happen. Everybody who's anything having to do with it will be dead. And nothing will happen. But in 5 years' time, maybe America may not exist. It's it's not guaranteed that America's going to last for another 5 years. You know, are they going to last for another 3 years? They're going to make it 250 years. You know, bloody hell. But we must try and find solace in the things that really mean stuff, really mean something. We need to cling to those things. You know, your loved ones. You know, and goodness where it happens. You know, and contribute to that goodness if you can. Yeah. Well, I'm doing this video on my laptop, which means that I can't edit this at all. So it's just a rant, and it's got all the silent bits in it and stuff. So you know, I could, if I was doing it through iMovie, I could take out all the extraneous stuff, which I'm sure there's a lot of in this one. But I just felt it was important for me to pop my head up again and do something and let you know that I'm still here. Um, but we just must do what we keep on doing. We must keep pushing. We hope and hope that something's going to change and something's going to stick. You know, it's I think it will, but we just don't know when it's going to happen. So, and try and live by principle. And try and stay free. And don't let people argue out of you out of your rights. You know, the country still belongs to us. You know, so try not to forget that, and have a good day. Stay free.